Some people win by looking wounded, and that is what makes them hard to question. The performance is soft. The damage it causes is not. You have probably felt it before. The strange moment when concern turns into control. The moment their pain becomes your leash. You try to help. You end up apologizing. You end up explaining yourself for things you did not do. That is the pattern we are naming today. Not real suffering, but the habit of using victimhood as armor, pressure, and escape. By the end, you will spot the signals earlier and protect your energy without becoming cold. And the most revealing tell is usually the one people excuse as sensitivity. Here's what is really happening. Some people learn that appearing powerless gives them a strange kind of power. It lowers other people's guard and invites rescue before facts are even clear. The room stops asking what happened and starts asking how to soothe them. That shift matters because sympathy can override judgment faster than anger ever could. When this pattern repeats, accountability quietly leaves through the back door. The person is no longer discussing behavior. They are managing the emotional weather around their behavior. Watch for this. A genuine victim wants safety, clarity, and resolution. A chronic victim stance often wants exemption, control, and permanent emotional priority. That difference is subtle at first, then obvious once you stop confusing distress with innocence. You can feel compassion and still keep your eyes open. That balance is your protection. One of the first signs is that every conflict arrives pre-packaged with a hero and villain. Their version is emotionally vivid, but strangely thin on context, sequence, and their own choices. They can describe your tone in detail. They struggle to describe their part with the same honesty. This does not mean they are lying about every hurt. It means the story may be arranged to protect identity, not reveal truth. People do this because blame threatens the self they need to preserve. If admitting fault feels unbearable, victimhood becomes a safer mask. It says, "Do not examine me too closely. I am the injured one here." That is why conversations with them can feel emotionally heavy yet strangely unproductive. You leave feeling responsible, but not informed. So here's how you take your power back. Slow the pace and ask for specifics before you offer agreement. What was said exactly? What happened right before that? What did you do next? Specific questions do something emotion alone cannot. They separate pain from narrative control. And if the story becomes irritated by clarity, that tells you even more. There is another pattern most people miss. The victim role often comes with moral pressure. If you disagree, you are painted as cruel. If you need space, you are accused of abandonment. If you hold a boundary, your boundary becomes the new offense. That is not vulnerability. That is emotional reversal. The spotlight moves from their behavior to your response to their behavior. Now you are defending your tone, your timing, your limits, or your need for distance. Meanwhile, the original issue stays untouched. This is why you can argue for an hour and never reach the actual point. The point keeps being replaced by a fresh injury. At work, it can sound like someone who misses deadlines then claims everyone expects too much from them. In families, it can look like a relative who insults you, then cries when you finally answer back. In dating, it can be a partner who breaks trust, then collapses into self-pity until you comfort them. Different setting. Same mechanism. Attention is redirected from impact to image. And the image they protect is always the misunderstood sufferer. Here is the sharper reframe. Some people do not avoid responsibility by denying facts. They avoid responsibility by flooding the room with feeling. That is why you must listen with empathy but evaluate with structure. Ask yourself 3 quiet questions. Is this person seeking repair or only relief? Are they naming their choices or only their pain? And after the emotion settles, does their behavior ever change? Those questions cut through confusion fast. Because anyone can have a bad day, a blind spot, or a painful history. A pattern is different. A pattern keeps using pain as a passport. It crosses every border without inspection. If you have caught yourself getting pulled into this, you are not alone. Tell me below. Most people are trained to respond to distress before they assess dynamics. That reflex is human. It is also why this tactic works. Good people do not want to seem harsh. Conscientious people replay conversations and assume they missed something. Empathetic people naturally fill in the blanks with generous explanations. The victim performer depends on that generosity staying unexamined. They know confusion buys time, and time lets emotion harden into your guilt. So do not rush to self-correct every time someone looks hurt. Hurt feelings are information. They are not final proof. A healthy conversation can survive a pause, a question, and a boundary. A manipulative one often cannot. Watch for the way they respond when your sympathy does not automatically become agreement. That moment reveals more than the original complaint. A sincere person may feel upset, but they can still engage with reality. A chronic victim, suddenly you are called selfish, cold, arrogant, or unsafe for asking ordinary questions. This is the tell I mentioned earlier. Fragility becomes a shield that punishes scrutiny. Once you see it, many old interactions make painful sense. You were never failing to comfort enough. You were being trained to stop noticing. And that training can become expensive. It drains your attention. It distorts your memory. It teaches you to distrust your own read of events. Over time, you start managing their emotions before your own needs even reach the surface. That is not compassion anymore. That is self-erasure in polite clothing. So what do you do in real time? First, name what is happening without attacking character. You can say, I hear that you feel hurt, and I also need to talk about what happened. That sentence matters because it refuses the false choice between empathy and truth. You are not arguing with their feelings. You are refusing to let feelings replace facts. Second, stay with one issue at a time. When the conversation suddenly jumps to 10 old wounds, bring it back gently. We can discuss that later, but right now I want to stay with this moment. That line protects you from emotional sprawl. Sprawl is where accountability goes to disappear. Third, stop over-explaining. Long defenses often feed the very dynamic that is trapping you. The more you justify ordinary limits, the more your limits sound negotiable. Short, calm clarity is stronger. I am not available for that. I am willing to discuss this when we can stay respectful. I will not keep having the same conversation in circles. None of those lines are cruel. They are clean. And clean language is hard to twist. There is another everyday clue worth noticing. People who live inside the victim role often collect rescuers and exhaust them in sequence. Each new person arrives certain they will finally be the one who understands. Then the pattern repeats. Intense closeness, heavy dependence, growing confusion, quiet resentment, messy fallout. The names change. The cycle does not. That is why history matters. Not gossip. Pattern. If everyone before you is described as abusive, jealous, heartless, or impossible, slow down. One painful relationship proves nothing. A trail of identical villains should make you curious. Here is the defensive insight. You do not need to prove someone is manipulative to protect yourself from manipulation. That standard traps many people. They wait for certainty worthy of a courtroom before honoring their own discomfort. But your boundary is not a verdict. It is a decision about access. You can step back because a dynamic feels unhealthy, repetitive, and destabilizing. You do not need permission from the person benefiting from your confusion. That may be the hardest lesson here. One more thing matters if this pattern has gone on for a long time. Your body may react before your mind does. You see their name and instantly tense. You hear the sigh in their voice and start rehearsing an apology. That reaction is not weakness. It is conditioning. When someone repeatedly links their distress to your duty, your nervous system starts predicting danger. Not physical danger necessarily, but relational danger, rejection, accusation, emotional chaos. So you rush to smooth things over before the storm fully arrives. This is why awareness alone is not always enough in the beginning. You may understand the pattern and still feel pulled by it. That is normal. Awareness is the light switch. Practice is what teaches your body that the room will not collapse if you stay calm. Start small. Delay one reply. Ask one clarifying question. Hold one boundary without adding a paragraph of explanation. Every small interruption weakens the old script they expect from you, and it strengthens a new script inside you. I can pause. I can think. I can choose my response instead of performing my conditioning. That shift is quiet, but it changes everything. Kindness without discernment becomes a tool other people can pick up and use on you. Real strength is not becoming numb. It is keeping your heart open and your judgment online. So when someone always plays the victim, listen carefully to what never changes. Do apologies turn into explanations? Do explanations turn into accusations? Do accusations turn into tears right when accountability arrives? That sequence is rarely random. It is often the whole strategy. And strategies lose power when you stop responding on cue. The aware person does not harden. They slow down. They notice the switch. They refuse the baited role of rescuer, judge, and emotional janitor. They stay compassionate without becoming capturable. That is what you are building. A mind that can recognize suffering without surrendering discernment. A presence that can offer care without offering endless access. A boundary that does not need anger to be real. And once you learn this, you start hearing the hidden request underneath the performance. Do not examine me. Do not leave me. Do not hold me to the same standard I place on you. Now you know how to answer. I can care about your pain and still require honesty. I can understand your struggle and still protect my peace. I can believe you've been hurt before and still refuse to be handled through that hurt. That is not harsh. That is mature. That is what taking your power back sounds like. And once you hear it clearly, the spell weakens fast. If this gave language to something you have lived, stay with Onyx mind. There is another pattern people miss until it costs them trust, time, and self-respect. Watch the next video and you will spot it much earlier next time. Subscribe if you want calm, sharp tools that help you recognize pressure before it owns the room. Stay aware. Stay steady. And do not confuse someone else's performance with your responsibility.